Hi everyone. So first thing to say, I was looking at comments on the video I made about policing in 2023 in Britain, and that's got last time I checked, 470 plus views. So that's always good to see when there's a sort of active response to my videos, because I don't make these for my own sake. It's to hear myself. I make them so that I want to put information and ideas and news out there. So thank you for everyone who commented on that. I do try to get back to comments, but if I don't get back to yours, please don't take it personally. It's just a practical issue. Um, if you've just come across my channel and you like what you hear, or you find it interesting, even if you don't agree with me, please do subscribe. I'm close to 2,000 subscribers now, and just hitting that little milestone would be good. So, I want to talk about the Lucy Letby case. Um, First thing to say here is it's a very complex case. I don't mean that the verdict is what it is. She has been found guilty. She's now serving a whole life order. It used to be called a whole life tariff. And she will rank among Britain's most prolific serial killers. She's not the only medical professional who's been a serial killer. Harold Shipman comes to mind. He's not just Britain's worst; he's one of the world's worst serial killers. But among other nurses, of course, the obvious comparison is Beverly Allitt. But there's also Colin Norris and Victorino Chua, among others. It's often said that the reason there's a disproportionate number of medical professionals involved in homicide is because they have the power of life and death. And the interesting thing about this case that I find striking is, on one hand, you have one of the most respected professions. And we all remember during the pandemic the clap for carers, and nurses would be pretty high up in terms of respected professions. Uh, you know, they're caring people. They're in a job where they save lives. Same with doctors. So I remember. I mean, it's that well known, well publicized picture now of Letby in her nursing uniform, holding the little baby thing. She just looked so normal. She really did look like the girl next door, just a completely normal young British woman. And I think that makes it all the more chilling. I mean, well, I would say this, it's right that we no longer have this Victorian mindset of a criminal looks like this. Um, Quite clearly, that is not true. Um, but like I said, it's a very complex case. There's a lot of angles to this. Um, My gut feeling is she's guilty based on the fact that this was an exhaustive investigation. I mean, this has been going on for years. It's all come to a head now, and it's a big story now. And it's there's lots of other videos out there. But this, I remember, this was going on in the background for several years now, and it really was a background story. It was very much kind of lost amidst lots of other stories. For obvious reasons, she hadn't been found guilty in a court of law. She was arrested in 2018. Um, Most of the deaths, well, all of the deaths that she was convicted of, all seven babies, were at the Countess of Chester Hospital. But I understand she also worked at a hospital in Liverpool, and they're now investigating deaths there. She was found guilty in Manchester Crown Court, and she's from Hereford originally. Um, But the big question here regarding what happened is, why were the whistleblowers ignored, and what were the circumstances that allowed this to happen? What was it that was going on in the hierarchy of that hospital structure? And it's probably not just that hospital that allowed this to happen. Um, so that I think there should be a public inquiry into that. There has to be a process whereby, if there are serious concerns raised over a professional, that those concerns are taken seriously. Now, the fact that the whistleblowers were actually told to apologise to Letby raises questions about what sort of sway she had over hospital management. It's definitely a strange thing. I think for me, what was quite striking is maybe we shouldn't wade too much into those diary entries that she reportedly said she was evil and she'd done it. That could have been, a mental breakdown or something. But um, I think what's striking is that her some of her behaviour throughout this. I mean, when she was arrested, she seemed kind of shocked, but she also acted like she expected it. You know, to me, an innocent person would be saying, "Well, what the hell's going on? What have I done? She just acted a bit kind of withdrawn and accepting. She just kind of went off of the officers, no questions asked. It just seemed a little bit strange. Her communication with the victims' families, the fact that she basically stopped them, tried to trace them down on social media, it's definitely crossing professional boundaries. That is very strange. Um, Now, an appeal's being launched because she has got whole life order. She's been sentenced to I think it's called Low Newton Prison, which is not far from where I live, actually. It's about 10 miles away in County Durham. Um, it's actually next to the so-called Monster Mansion, HMP Franklin, which houses some of Britain's most notorious male inmates, including Charles Taylor, the former Liberian warlord, among others. Um, but I looked at Daily Mirror video yesterday and it showed her cell, and no doubt that will infuriate a lot of people. It's it was basic. You certainly wouldn't call it luxurious, but I think what will anger people is that it looked nice and homely. There was curtains on the windows, there were bars. It is a prison, but there were curtains there, a nice little cabinet, a bed. There was a library apparently, and there's even, and I think this is rather galling. There's a facility where inmates can pet animals as part of therapy. I mean, I think that is perverse. I will say this just briefly about prison in general. I take the view that prisons shouldn't be deliberately brutal. I don't think they should be so inhumane and so brutal that they are, like torture. But I do not think that prison should be comfortable. I think prison should look like prison. I don't think it should be a nice place. I don't think it should be a brutal place. I don't think, you should have situations where inmates are allowed to run riot. But prisons should not, they shouldn't be homely. They should look like prisons. Now, I suppose the caveat here is she will never see the light of day. She is going to die behind bars, presumably an old woman. She'll probably be on suicide watch. And because of the nature of her crimes, child murder, it's highly likely she'll be targeted by other inmates. That's just the way prison goes. So it's likely that she'll be highly watched in the coming months, maybe even years. Um, but it shouldn't be comfortable. There's also a lot of controversy over this issue of her not attending court for the verdict. Um, Richard Madley attracted some controversy when he said she should be tasered or dragged in, but frankly, a lot of people might well agree with that. Patrick Christys was talking about this on GB News. Should inmates be forced to attend verdicts? I think they should. I mean, people might say, the counter argument might be, well, what difference does it make? They're getting the sentence anyway. Well, it matters because the victims, the relatives, need to know that that person is directly hearing why they're getting the sentence. That they are getting consequences for what they have done. I mean, the consequences will happen anyway, but I think hearing it is very important, actually. I think it's optics. I think it shows this is justice in action. So I do think they should be physically restrained and brought to court. If that isn't practically viable, then it should be put into their cell, on a microphone or something, so that they have to listen. They have to listen to it. Now, an appeal is going to be automatically launched, and one thing that has emerged, well, two things, is there's a group in California, of all places, called Science on Trial, and they're saying they're questioning the scientific data that was used, in evidence against her. I guess what some people would say is that everything used to prosecute her was circumstantial, that she happened to be in every ward when these babies died. Now, if that was the sole reason that she has been, got this sentence, I'd be a bit uneasy about it. I think, well, that could just be coincidence. But I think this trial has been exhaustive. I don't think there's any significant doubt for, she didn't get a fair trial or something. I think she did. And um, so I don't know how far this appeal is going to go, but I think it will anger a lot of people. But it should be said that whole life orders are very, very rarely given. Even like, the majority of life sentences aren't life sentences. I just don't like the terminology because I think it's misleading. And it's one of many, many areas in which our justice system, the public's disillusioned with it because a life sentence is not a life sentence. So, for example, if you have a serious crime like murder and the murderer gets 21 years, it's a long sentence, but that should not be called a life sentence. It should be called a 21-year sentence or an 18-year sentence or whatever it is. In this case, it really is a life sentence because she will never be released. And there's only a small handful of other inmates get that. Actually, one of the others is Joanna Dennehy, who will be in the same prison. She was convicted of murdering three men a few years ago. Um, so it's rarely given, even for some very, very wicked criminals. My heart obviously goes out to the families of these babies. I mean, the pain that they're going through, knowing that their children have had their entire lives robbed. These babies could have grown up to be all sorts of things. Teachers, architects, police officers, soldiers, nurses, doctors, scientists. There's 7 lives snuffed out, and there's a little boy who has lifelong disabilities as a result. And then, of course, others who were injured as a result of her actions. There isn't really much more to say. Like I say, it's a complex case. No doubt there's a lot of other angles to this. I will say one more thing about this. Those who are saying it's the biggest miscarriage of justice in British judicial history. Well, they haven't proven that so far. There may be a psychological thing going on with that because there was another case, and I made a video about it. Andrew Malkinson, who was a man who was spent 17 years in prison. I think the crime was rape. Um, it may have been murder. I can't recall off the top of my head. It was a serious crime anyway, but 17 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. Now the big thing is, retrospectively, the government's now overturned this idea that he should pay any board and bed, and that's had to change as a result of his case. I wonder, are they maybe some of the campaigners for Lucy Letby sort of psychologically thinking of that case, and they're the problem with miscarriages of justice, aside from the injustice of it and the fact that an innocent person serves jail time, is also that it means there's a risk that the guilty will get away with it because of such fear of, oh, well, there might be, there's too many questions here. Um, I think absolutely the evidence has to be very, very solid. That goes without saying. If this appeal is in any way successful and significant evidence emerges that there's a flaw in the trial or something, that would be a very, I'll be making a very different video. But I think what's happened here is she is guilty, and I think that there were warnings about her. Another thing that will come out with is that apparently doctors picked on her and stuff. But there has been, my mum was a nurse for years, retired now. There has traditionally been some tensions between nurses and doctors, different levels of that environment. But again, the question would be, what makes her special? Why would doctors have picked on her alone? If that was the case, other nurses would have complained if that was the culture in the hospital. I think she's probably a narcissist. I'm not saying that as she is a narcissist. I'm not qualified to say that, but based on, some of her antics, like playing God and, she wanted action and stuff, it seems that she is, yeah, it seems that there'd be something along that in her personality. I don't know. But this is one of the rare cases where justice has been served. I mean, I don't think anyone can say that verdict is wrong. Some might say we should bring back the death penalty, but in Britain, that is the absolute maximum sentence available. You literally cannot get higher than that. than dying behind bars. And she won't be allowed to take her own life either, because that will be, they're going to not let her get bedding or anything in which she could do that. So she's going to know that the rest of her life she cannot leave that compound. So when you look at it that way, maybe it's not as comfortable as it seems. But the families, the parents of those babies, they've got a life sentence. So let me know your thoughts on this. I don't think we're going to hear the end of this. There will be an inquiry into what happened at the hospital, what sort of whistleblowing, avenues are there, and how that is processed. And there's a lot of other questions about this case. But as it stands, I think probably the right verdict's been reached. I'll just close with this. My gut feeling is some people are 100% sure she's guilty. Some people are convinced she's innocent. I'm more swayed towards, yeah, she's guilty. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not. I think that there has been high profile miscarriages of justice, so that's all I'll say. I don't think that's the case here. I don't think that's the case here. But I'm kind of 70, 80% I veer towards, yeah, she's guilty and she's paying for what she's done. But I hope to God they have got it right, because it would be awful if they didn't. But I just think the number of people that have testified against her, and the way she's behaved, and the fact that this was an exhaustive trial, I think she's guilty as hell. And that is evil, what she has done. She's an evil person. And it is right that she will die behind bars. Let me know your thoughts.